what he looked like. And then I went and parked and pulled up the photographs of him, and I'm 99.99% sure that was him.
Not that long ago, a hiker said that he believed he witnessed Brian Laundrie driving near the Appalachian Trail, but now the 911 call that he made has also been released, shedding new light on the potential whereabouts of Brian Laundrie. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. So as I just mentioned, the police have just released more of the 911 audio from a call made by a hiker who believes he encountered Brian Laundrie on the Appalachian Trail earlier this week. The call was made to the Haywood County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina by a Florida resident named Dennis Davis. Dennis told dispatchers that he was 99.99% sure that the man he saw was the missing 23-year-old Brian Laundrie. It has almost been 3 weeks since Gabby Petito's fiance Brian Laundrie was reportedly last seen leaving his home to go for a hike at the Carlton Reserve in Sarasota County, Florida. Using this information, law enforcement had spent countless hours searching for him in this swampy area. However, this new 911 call may actually put Brian hundreds of miles away near the border of North Carolina and Tennessee. The sheriff's office said that they had received 10 calls regarding Brian Laundrie's sightings, but chose to release this one, I'm assuming, because it's the most credible eyewitness report that they have right now. If not credible, he's at least very confident that he did in fact see Brian. At the start of the call, the hiker says, "I'm on the highway right now, but I ran into Brian Laundrie just a little while ago." The call lasted for just over 4 minutes, and the main takeaway was when he mentioned that he saw Brian in a white truck. He goes on to say, "As I turned around and I'm coming back by him, he's waving his arm out of his truck like for me to slow down. He was talking wild. He said that his girlfriend, and then it's unintelligible in this part, and he had to go out to California to see her, and he was asking me how to get to California," adding, "I went and parked and pulled up the photographs of him, and I'm 99.99% sure that was him." According to the Haywood County Sheriff's Office, this 911 call came in around 2:40 a.m. on Saturday, and 2 deputies were reportedly dispatched immediately to the North Carolina-Tennessee border, where they said that they encountered a person who was not Laundrie. In a statement to the press, the Sheriff's Office said, "We will continue to respond and fully investigate all calls for service related to the nationwide search for Mr. Laundrie. There have been a lot of people lately claiming to have witnessed Brian Laundrie either hiking or eating in a restaurant, but so far no law enforcement agency that we are aware of at least has deemed any of these sightings to be credible." Back in Sarasota County, the search efforts for Laundrie have also been significantly scaled back. Despite the FBI leading the search, Northport police told news outlets that they have been consistently providing support in smaller groups. Photojournalist Paul Lamison witnessed 3 men out on a swamp in an airboat with a dog heading deep into the reserve, but federal and local authorities still have found no signs, clues, or evidence that Laundrie has indeed stopped by this swampy area. As such, he remains the sole person of interest in the Gabby Petito case after authorities say he returned to his parents' home in Northport without her on September 1st from their cross-country road trip that they had taken together. The internet is running wild with theories about Brian Laundrie right now after drone footage over the Laundrie's backyard went viral. The main reason for it going viral, though, is not only the fact that Brian's dad is pointing out at the drone, but because the internet detectives online noticed what appeared to be a bunker in their backyard. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. Many people today are picking apart the photo taken over Brian Laundrie's parents' house in Northport, Florida. The big thing that people focused on, though, was this large white-colored pit in their backyard, leading many to believe that this could be where Brian has been hiding out. Yes, the person of interest in the Gabby Petito case may have never even left his own property. The photo that has been widely shared on Twitter shows Chris and his wife Roberta Laundrie, with Chris, as I mentioned, pointing out the fact that they are being watched by a drone. The person who shared the image tweeted and said, "Brian Laundrie's father noticed the drone and pointed at it. He then informed his wife Roberta and then quickly retreated inside their home." Many people were quick in the replies to suggest that this could be some kind of bunker that would be hiding Brian. One user replied, "Why does the Laundrie backyard have what resembles a bunker hatch in the center? Looks to even have door pulls on it even. I used to have a survival bunker and that is sure what the hatch looked like." Although many people from Florida said that if you dig even 4 feet, you're bound to hit water, so that could explain away this bunker theory, but it's not entirely impossible for there to be bunkers in Florida. I mean, there was the Cold War era, and according to one user who did a lot of research into this, they said, "This subdivision was built up for utilities and there are plenty of built-in pools, but there are bunkers, survival, and storm shelters all over the place, and businesses who sell them. Also, the government literally put them in for people in the 50s there." On the flip side of things, let's say it's not a bunker at all and there's no chance that Brian is hiding out there. Why in the world are his parents just getting some landscaping done while their son is out missing? You would think, being accused of something heinous aside, that they would at least not be calmly going through their regular day-to-day activities. It just seems strange. Although I've also never had a son on the run from the FBI, so I wouldn't know how you would act in that scenario, but I don't think I would be calmly gardening. According to another Twitter user, "Google Earth shows no white ground structure in the yard, no fence either. Wonder how new that is and if the FBI searched that. They bought the house in 2015. Alternatively, it could just be some kind of pool pump, because I really doubt that they built a whole bunker within 6 years of owning the property. Plus, new details have emerged that uncovered Brian's earlier movements, as well as traces of human activity at the nature reserve where people have been focusing this massive search. According to CNN, police have apparently found the remnants of a campsite that looks like it was used recently at the Carlton Reserve. What's strange though is that because the campsite has been closed for investigation, they didn't even allow the search to include Brian's father, which is weird because he's believed to actually know the trails that his son would often hike. Laundrie's father had been asked to show law enforcement the trails at the reserve, but police decided to restrict the search to not include Chris Laundrie. What's also weird and worth mentioning here is that the Laundries have also changed their story. They now believe that they last saw Brian on September 13th, which is a day earlier than they had initially told investigators. Their lawyer Stephen Bertolino said, "The Laundries were basing the day Brian left on their recollection of certain events. Upon further communication with the FBI and confirmation of the Mustang being at the Laundrie residence on Wednesday, September 15th, we now believe the day Brian left to hike in the preserve was Monday, September 13th. Interestingly enough though, he also provided a reason for why Brian had left Gabby Petito in the middle of their cross-country road trip just weeks before her body was discovered at a camping area in Wyoming. Brian flew home to Tampa from SLC on August 17th and returned to SLC on August 23rd to rejoin Gabby. To my knowledge, Brian and Gabby paid for the flights as they were sharing expenses. Brian flew home to obtain some items and empty and close the storage unit to save money as they contemplated extending the road trip." Brian Laundrie's father, Christopher Laundrie, has just joined the search to find his missing son, who has been named as a person of interest in the disappearance of Gabby Petito. He was previously barred from searching the area because of police restrictions. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. But first, if you could do us a big favor and please tap that like button, we'd really appreciate it. And that out of the way, let's begin. Chris Laundrie was witnessed leaving his home in Northport, Florida, wearing long pants, a ball cap, and carrying a plastic bag. He then left the family home in his red truck and joined law enforcement agencies at the Miakachi Creek Environmental Park. This area is part of the Carlton Reserve, where Brian had said that he was going. Reporters that were standing outside the Laundrie residence asked the lawyer Stephen Bertolino where Mr. Laundrie was headed, and he confirmed that he believed that he was going to help them search. According to reports, Chris arrived at the park around 10:30 a.m. and Mr. Bertolino told Fox News, "Chris Laundrie was asked to assist law enforcement in their search for Brian at the preserve today. Since the preserve has been closed to the public, Chris has not been able to look for Brian in the only place Chris and Roberta believe Brian may be." This was back on Wednesday when he was not involved with the search, but said that he and his wife are hopeful there will be another opportunity to assist them. Their lawyer also noted that the police had to postpone Chris from participating in the search. Josh Taylor, the Northport Police Department's chief spokesperson, explained why this would be the case and said, "In no world would we be the agency asking the family to help search in an FBI-led investigation," which makes a lot of sense, but if Chris said that he knew the trails that Brian would frequent, you would think that he'd be upfront with that information to the FBI. Mr. Bertolino also gave more information on why the police would now require Mr. Laundrie's assistance and said, Mr. Bertolino said the police wanted to narrow down some of the places in the park that Brian had liked to visit in the past. I think they're just narrowing down their search based upon the inability to locate Brian on previous days. For the past 2 weeks now, the Carlton Reserve has remained the main focus by authorities in this manhunt for Brian Laundrie, but as we've mentioned in previous videos, those efforts have been scaled back in recent days. Brian's parents have remained quite silent on the situation due to the intense public scrutiny that they are facing. Hopefully the search will come to an end soon with the help of Chris Laundrie now narrowing down places that the police should be searching. As of right now, the hunt for Brian Laundrie is still on, and while authorities search for him, many news outlets are highlighting the suspicious things that Brian did in the months before his fiancée Gabby Petito was found dead in Wyoming. I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. For starters, the 23-year-old fugitive had uploaded some pretty sinister looking artwork to his social media pages. He described himself as a comic book fan, but among his various Instagram posts were a lot of very bizarre drawings. A majority of this artwork was shared just months before he began his cross-country trip with Gabby. This one piece especially was chilling. It shows a man wearing a wolf mask holding a blood-soaked knife as the character's pants and jacket are also covered in blood splatters. Another post from back in July 2020 was captioned with Grim Reaper leading sheep to the slaughter and a mousetrap. This one had a herd of sheep surrounded by figures wielding scythes. In another Instagram post, he said that he and Gabby had been reading the horror satire novel called Lullaby by Chuck Palahniuk. In the caption, he writes, "Reading is different than any other consumption of media. It takes more effort than staring at a screen half alive. It allows you to use your brain rather than melt it, and there is no author more stimulating relating to me than Chuck Palahniuk. The book also tells the story of a journalist who is writing this article about crib death and notices a bizarre connection to the deaths of his own wife and infant. He then becomes a serial killer who kills people over minor annoying things. In another snap, he is slicing an apple while reading a book called Rant. This was a book that is told in the form of an oral biography and is based around a high school rebel. In the synopsis, it's described as a mind-bending vision of the future as only Chuck Palahniuk could imagine. So, he really likes this author. In the caption, Laundrie wrote, "The effing craziest out of all of Chuck's books on my shelf. I can't fathom how he must have written this one. I'd love to preach all of the insane twists and turns, but all I can say is that I'll never forget the name Rant Casey or Green Taylor Sims." And according to the timeline, Laundrie also returned to Florida on August 17th, just days before he and Gabby had an incident outside of a grocery store in Moab. He then apparently had left a motel in Salt Lake City to help his father, Chris Laundrie, empty out a storage unit that contained Gabby's possessions. He then returned to Utah, where he and Gabby would both check out of their hotel on August 24th. In a statement to the press, the Laundrie family lawyer confirmed this timeline and explained further by saying, "Brian flew home to Tampa from SLC on August 17th and returned to SLC on August 23rd to rejoin Gabby. To my knowledge, Brian and Gabby paid for the flights as they were sharing expenses. Brian flew home to obtain some items and empty and close a storage unit to save money as they contemplated extending the road trip. What many people were curious about, though, was what this locker had inside of it. Why would he need to go back to that locker and empty out that locker if it supposedly had just Gabby's belongings in it? You'd think that she'd want to come along for the ride for that one." By August 25th, just a couple days after Brian returned, some of Gabby's last text messages were sent to her family as they reached the Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Weeks later, on September 19th, Gabby's remains were found. A woman named Jessica Schultz also claimed to have spotted a man she believed to be Brian and said that he was acting weird where Gabby's body was found. I also saw some other YouTube channels going more in depth with that video that was taken by those other van life YouTubers that showed Gabby's van parked on the side of the road. What's shocking is that as their vehicle is approaching the white Ford Transit van, you can actually see the back door of the van closing. And Jessica Schultz said that she had seen Brian in the van on August 26th and claimed that she saw the vehicle again on two other occasions, the 27th and the 28th. She went on to say, "You know when you're out in the middle of nowhere, your hackles go up when you see something that's out of the ordinary." On top of that, his own sister, Cassie Laundrie, said that her brother and her parents went camping on September 6th, just 75 miles from their home in Northport, Florida. But according to her, they only stayed on the campsite for 6 hours. She also claimed that Brian didn't mention Gabby's name once the entire time. And when speaking to reporters outside of the family home, she said, "I am losing my parents and my brother and my children's aunt and my future sister-in-law on top of this." And when asked to clarify what she meant by losing her parents, Cassie added, "They're not talking to us either," followed by, "If I knew I would say, I don't know," when asked why not. So far, there have been dozens of sightings of who people believe to be Brian Laundrie, and even Dog the Bounty Hunter has joined in on this search. These things that Brian did, though, are definitely all very suspicious. Dog the Bounty Hunter is not only allegedly leaving the search for Brian Laundrie after suffering an injury, he is also making claims that Brian may be a serial killer. The reality TV star who joined the hunt for Brian last month shared his most recent findings as he withdrew from the search, and I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. Dog the Bounty Hunter, whose real name is Dwayne Chapman, is said to have injured his ankle while on the hunt for Brian Laundrie. According to reports, he has now returned to his home in Colorado to see his doctor. News anchor Josh Benson confirmed this and tweeted about Dwayne's second initiative of raising funds to continue this search. In the tweet, he says, "Just got an update from Dog the Bounty Hunter's team. They say he's headed back to Colorado soon to meet with his doctor after injuring his ankle in the search. He's also raising funds to continue what he calls an expensive search," adding, "Team says he's put together a talented network of local team members he calls the Florida team that will continue the search while he's gone. He says he will continue to process leads in Colorado while he's there. And part of that Florida team will be Dwayne's daughter, Lisa Chapman, who confirmed on Twitter that she will indeed be continuing this search for Brian, as she also confirmed that her father was heading home. In the tweet, she says, "Dad is headed back to Colorado temporarily to handle some business. Remember, he was in Florida on his honeymoon. We are still actively searching for Brian Laundrie, leaving a team in place in Florida. As always, whatever I can share with you, I will." Adding to all of that news, we also had Dog revealing his fears that Brian could potentially be a serial killer. Dwayne explained how he would rely heavily on the activity of his targets on social media just to track them down. And in Laundrie's case, he said what he and his wife found on Facebook was absolutely terrifying. He is quoted as saying, "I'm thinking more and more about him being maybe a serial killer, not just a killer of Gabby." And if you watched the video I did recently about these suspicious things Brian did before Gabby's disappearance, Dog the Bounty Hunter believes those same images expose a deeper issue with Brian and one that gave him goosebumps. He claimed Laundrie was also a big fan of serial killer books, and he went on to say, "The books he reads are unbelievable. This kid Brian has taken those books obviously to heart." That being said, while Brian Laundrie is considered to be a person of interest in Gabby Petito's death, he has not officially been named a suspect by authorities. Plus, unless Dog the Bounty Hunter has some evidence linking Brian to the disappearance of other people, these claims are just sensationalizing Laundrie for more attention to himself. The FBI and Dog the Bounty Hunter are continuing their search for Brian Laundrie after the coroner revealed Gabby's cause of death to be strangulation. Although the main question on a lot of people's minds is what happens if Brian Laundrie is never found? I'm going to tell you everything you need to know right here on IO. To refresh your memory, 2 days after Gabby Petito was reported missing by her parents, Brian disappeared. He told his parents that he was going to be taking a hike into the Carlton Reserve near the family home in Northport, Florida. A source close to the Laundrie family told CNN that Brian did not bring his cell phone or wallet with him when he left the home. The very fact that Brian returned home from his cross-country trip without Gabby and in her van raised a lot of flags. Her family started to get worried after she had failed to check in with them for several days. Since this time, there has been a massive search effort conducted in the Carlton Reserve, with Brian being named as a person of interest in her disappearance. However, survival experts are now saying that even a highly trained survival expert would have a difficult time evading the law as well as staying alive in that swamp for weeks upon weeks, which leads many to believe that Brian either is not in the swamp or he is deceased. The Northport police spokesperson Josh Taylor also added that the likelihood of Brian surviving in this gator-infested swamp was about 50-50. Former FBI agents have also voiced their concern regarding this massive search effort and warned that at some point they will have to stop searching. There's no way that the FBI will task their agents to just keep looking indefinitely until he is found. At some point there will be a larger task at hand that they will need to shift their focus back to. Not to mention Dog the Bounty Hunter just injured his ankle during his search and said that he was headed back to Colorado. Now, he will still have a Florida team on the ground to continue searching, but slowly the search is falling apart. The main question that needs to be answered though is what happens if Brian Laundrie is never found? Aside from being a person of interest in the disappearance of Gabby Petito, Mr. Laundrie only has a warrant out for his arrest after he used someone else's bank cards to rack up charges totaling $1,000. As for his family, no charges have been brought against them, and it's not clear if any ever could be. The warrant for Brian's arrest didn't come until much later into the search for him, so that means if his family did help him escape, they would be well within their rights to assist their son in avoiding the law. Not saying that they did do that because we don't have concrete evidence to suggest this. I'm just saying that if they did, they would have no repercussions for it. If it happened after his warrant was issued, then that's a different story. If the police can prove that the Laundrie family helped Brian after the warrant was issued, then they would face charges for aiding and abetting a fugitive. Now, many people are wondering if he could perhaps be convicted even if he was never found. In the United States, Rule 43 of the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure says that an individual that flees during the course of a trial can be tried and convicted while absent from the court. Unfortunately, the only way that's possible is if Brian was arrested or had an upcoming court date that he was fleeing from. Right now, he's just a person with a warrant for an unauthorized credit card use that took off into the Carlton Reserve. A ruling from 1993 in a case called Crosby versus United States made it so that if a defendant is not present at their first trial, they can't be convicted. So until Brian is found and brought in for a court date, there's no way that the courts can just convict him. Brian wouldn't be the first person to be charged with a crime and then evade being captured though. Compared to some other people that have done this, Brian hasn't been missing for very long. A man named Seth Ferranti was wanted for a non-violent crime and he escaped the law for 2 years before he was finally caught and charged. John Lee Paul, who was a race car driver, was a person of interest in the disappearance of his ex-girlfriend that was last spotted on his boat in Thailand. This guy has been missing since 2001. Another man named Robert William Fisher went missing in April of 2001 after his home in Arizona exploded, resulting in the loss of his family. He was also a person of interest for police, and they believe that he had actually rigged the natural gas to blow up the family home, but he too was never found. The wildest case of this though was D.B. Cooper. Cooper had hijacked a Northwest Orient Airlines flight in 1971 and then parachuted out of the plane somewhere over the Pacific Northwest. However, he also had with him somewhere in the ballpark of $200,000 that he had extorted. Today that would be the same purchasing power as $1.3 million. He too though was never found. I'm not saying give up all hope on finding Brian Laundrie, but I am saying I wouldn't bet on his parents being charged or him if he's never found.